All right, so next, everybody, we would like to say our profound appreciation and gratitude for the veterans for Bernie and Gavin Markovics. Next up, we have Tyson Banker, a Marine Corps infantry combat veteran of Iraq and our keynote speaker, a licensed attorney and a college business law professor. But that says little about the size of this man's heart. When he saw the people of Ferguson, Missouri, confronted by police in military gear, he went out there in uniform with a sign saying, "No tanks on American streets." He currently serves as the National Director with Vets for Bernie. Tyson Banker.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? What a beautiful day in San Francisco. And this is my first time ever to San Francisco, so I'm really enjoying myself so far, I can say that much. Beautiful city, and I like what you do with the weather, so I really appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to Gavin Markovics and David Karbelnikov and all the other volunteers and organizations for making this event possible. An unbelievable amount of time and energy, all done by volunteers to make this a reality. And this is the first one that they've put together on short notice. And I can assure you, in the days to come, there will be many more, and the crowd will be much larger. But this is a true success, and I thank you for all being here. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the men and women of our military, both past and present. Today, next week on Veterans Day, and always, we honor the sacrifices of those who serve. Instead of seeking fame and fortune like the latest self-serving pop icon or reality TV star, veterans make a conscious decision to serve others, to put their lives on the line for causes greater than themselves, the causes of freedom and liberty. Military service demands a special kind of sacrifice. Veterans don't get to choose where they'll live or serve, or what kinds of risks they'll be exposed to. Those decisions are made by our representatives in Washington. No one knows this truth more than the families of veterans, who also make many sacrifices of their own. During deployments, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, they all make sacrifices of their own. For months and years, the stress of worrying about their loved one in harm's way is an incredible burden to bear. And for veterans who make the ultimate sacrifice, the lasting effect of their loss is felt by many. In so many ways, it is because of the sacrifices made by the women and men in uniform that we continue to enjoy our freedoms today. So would everybody please join me in a round of applause for our veterans that are here and those who are not. It's important to remember that what we're doing here today is not allowed in many places around the world. In countries like North Korea, Burma, Turkmenistan, and now the festering Islamic State formerly known as Iraq, people have no freedom of speech or of assembly, just like we're doing here. Those who speak out risk being thrown in jail, tortured, or put to death. That's right. Do not take these freedoms lightly, because a lot of sacrifice has gone into them. Not here in America, we don't have to worry about that type of persecution. Thanks to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we, the people, can gather and speak freely without fear of reprisal. And by being out here today and exercising your constitutional rights, you are honoring the service of those who fought to protect those rights. That's really important, because our rights are only effective when we exercise them. That's what this political revolution is all about, and that's what makes America great. As the many great speakers have expressed, we face some pretty serious challenges as a nation, and we've come together to meet those challenges. Enough is the rallying cry of our generation. This political revolution, it means that we are rising to the occasion to demand immediate action on things like equal pay for women, fair pay for all American workers, for fair trade and corporate tax reform, for job-creating investments in clean energy and rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, for sensible and moral immigration reform, for universal education and health care, for criminal justice reform, for a VA system worthy of our veterans. The list goes on and on. Yeah. But as we all know, right now, the game is rigged against us. Our political system has been corrupted. We have a government that no longer seems to represent our interests, the interests of the American people. Democracy has quite literally become a commodity to be sold. Lawmakers sell their votes in Congress to the highest bidder. Let's be honest. We all know that since the Citizens United and McCutcheon Supreme Court decisions, spending on elections has skyrocketed to obscene levels. So clearly, if money equals speech, as the Supreme Court believes, then billionaires have a heck of a lot more speech than us. And that's bullshit. A perfect example of big money's influence on our political system is the Koch brothers, who, with a combined net worth of over $80 billion, can easily afford to drop a few $100 million without batting an eye. The brothers have made little efforts to hide their true intentions either. You may have seen the Kochs recently appear on MSNBC's Morning Joe, apparently in an attempt to soften their public image. When one of the hosts asked Charles Koch if he thought it was undemocratic that roughly 150 families will finance most of the candidates for president, most meaning everybody but Bernie Sanders, this was his response. He said, quote, "For me, it depends on to what end." He said he hoped to raise $250 million for his candidates, probably a lowball number, because government is picking winners and losers. Quote, "You want to be a winner more than you want to be a loser, so you give to slant it your way." Those were his words, verbatim. Slant things your way so you can be the winner. That's right, and everybody else is a loser. When Charles Koch wins, who do you think is the loser? Charles Koch, a man worth over $40 billion, is worried about the government unfairly picking winners and losers. And he'd rather pick the winners and losers himself. Unbelievable. $40 billion. That's not enough. He even flat out said, "I expect something in return for my political donations." No. Watch the tape. "I expect something in return." He backtracked and made some ridiculous statement about how the government should institute regulations that require companies to only profit when they benefit people's lives. That's what he backtracked with. Does anybody believe that Charles Koch wants, one, more regulation, and two, that regulation to require that people's lives are made better by corporations? Does anybody believe that bullshit? Come on. Everyone knows that no financial investment, whether on Wall Street or in Washington, is ever made without wanting a payoff in return of some kind. When it happens in politics, that is the very definition of quid pro quo corruption. I give you something, you give me something in return. So what exactly do the Koch brothers want in return from the candidates they pay off? First, let's get some quick facts about the Kochs. Koch Industries generates a whopping $115 billion in yearly revenues, mostly from fossil fuel. They are one of the 3 top polluters of America's air, water, and climate. And their companies dump more pollution into the nation's waterways than the industrial giants General Electric and International Paper combined. Rolling Stone magazine even called the Kochs a toxic empire whose profits finance the modern GOP, end quote. Not only are the Koch brothers some of the biggest polluters on the planet, but they actively lobby against investments in renewable energy. Thanks, I love you too, man. Roger that. We'll continue moving. I like renewable energy, and I think it's ridiculous that someone would try and block renewable energy. Why would people block renewable energy? Because if people can produce their own energy from solar, wind, and other sources, that means energy producers like the Kochs can't sell us more dirty oil and coal. That's exactly what we want. If we're going to leave a habitable planet for our children and our grandchildren, we have to break our addiction to coal and oil and start investing heavily in green energy technology. It's past time that America gets serious about climate change. The reason why more progress hasn't been made is simple. Big energy companies like the Kochs pay politicians to deny basic science on their behalf. Simple. Politicians like Senator Jim Inhofe. Has anybody heard of Senator Jim Inhofe? We have some fans in the house. Okay. Senator Jim Inhofe claims that climate change is a hoax because the Earth goes through cycles. And he's not the only one. No shit, the Earth does go through cycles, and sometimes it snows in the winter. But never before has petroleum and coal been extracted from the ground as fast as possible and burned into gas that fills the sky. This isn't rocket science. It's a matter of simple physics even a child can understand. But like the old saying goes, it's hard to get a man to understand something when his livelihood depends on him not understanding. We need to elect officials who appreciate science and who will act on the warnings of the scientific community. Bernie! That is Bernie. And though it's often overlooked, climate change is about more than just greenhouse gases filling the atmosphere. It's about ecological destruction on this planet. Things like deforesting, strip mining, mountaintop mining, fracking, factory farming, overfishing, aquatic dead zones, species extinction on every continent. There's literally so much trash in the ocean that giant plastic continents now form with the currents. They're called gyres. There's 7 of them now. This kind of destruction should sicken and worry everyone. Living more in harmony with our environment is not only a moral issue, it's smart long-term planning for generations to come. Not to mention, if we want future generations of Americans to succeed, we've got to make some serious changes to our laws here at home. Things like universal higher education and health care are a no-brainer. I've heard people ask, how are we going to pay for something like free college for all? The answer's simple. Make Wall Street pay for it. Make Wall Street pay for it. We taxpayers bailed them out to the tune of at least $16 trillion. The least they can do is return the favor. Bernie Sanders has offered a bill to do just that, which would tax Wall Street speculation, which caused the problem, a mere 50 cents for every $100 trade. Is there anyone out here who could live with that? A couple of you? Okay. I'm okay with that too. We've also got to reform our broken criminal justice system. Prohibition hasn't worked because people will always use substances, myself included. We've got to stop treating people, we've got to stop treating addiction like a crime and stop throwing non-violent offenders in jail. We've got to change civil asset forfeiture laws, which incentivize police forces to focus their efforts on drug eradication over all else. It's wrong. Yeah. After 80 years, the time has come to end the failed war on drugs. Like Bernie Sanders has repeatedly said, there's something really wrong when a teenager gets a criminal record for a joint. And yet Wall Street banksters who wrecked our economy avoided prosecution entirely. They weren't even investigated. For the love of God. What does that say about our country? Where are our priorities? Who are our laws protecting? Not the people. Seems more and more like it's protecting only multinational corporations and interests that have nothing to do with the American people. Did you know that every single minute an American is arrested for pot possession? That is insane. That is insane. And I like what you're doing out here in California on pot, by the way. And I hope you keep it up. Now, I've got to say what's even crazier than such a double standard of justice is the federal government's current positions on marijuana. I'm not sure if it's a position or positions. What I mean is, according to the law, federal law, specifically the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, which schedules all substances in America, marijuana is more addictive and dangerous than even cocaine. And it has, get this, no medicinal benefits under any circumstance. That's what the federal law says. We all know that's bullshit, right? But that's what the federal law says. Now, who's ever heard of patent number 6630507? What's that? No one's ever heard of patent 6630507?
No, sir.
Why?
Well, let me tell you about patent 6630507. Patent 6630507 is a patent for medical marijuana that is owned by the Department of Health and Human Services. Yes, you heard that right. The federal government granted itself a medical marijuana patent in 2003. And according to the patent, marijuana has substantial medicinal benefits. So much so that HHS granted an exclusive license for patent 6630507 to a drug company called Canalife, with a K, not a C. Isn't that cute? Cannabis Life. It's a corporation trying to make medicines they can sell us off of marijuana. This is the kind of sheer hypocrisy that must end. Next week is Veterans Day, and you can rest assured that every DC politician will return to their home districts and march in parades and give speeches. They'll give their annual platitudes about how much they support the troops and they respect our sacrifices. Stop laughing. But once the ceremonies are over and the cameras disappear, they'll return to Washington, unwilling to advocate for veterans where it matters most. Right now, there are still 22 veterans who take their lives every day because their PTSD is going unchecked. In recent years, more veterans have committed suicide than have been killed by enemy insurgents in combat. Think about that for a second. How long are these troops being forced to wait before they are seen? I can't hear you. One more time, please. That's what our representatives in Washington need to hear all the time until there are no more suicides from Iraq and Afghanistan. Not only that, but tens of thousands of veterans are still being denied the retirement and educational benefits they were promised when they signed up. Hell, I know Vietnam veterans who are still fighting to get compensation for Agent Orange over 40 years ago.
Amen. Amen.
I know a dozen myself from my small town in Jacksonville, Illinois. If the government is still denying Agent Orange, what else are they denying from you?
Your life.
Perhaps. There's a big difference between saying you support the troops and actually supporting the troops.
Amen. Amen.
That fact couldn't have been more clear last February when Senate Republicans blocked a comprehensive VA bill that would have greatly expanded veterans' access to health care. Their reason? They said it costs too much money. These are the same people that when I was a boot Marine down in 29 Palms, California, had no problem sending us into a quagmire without a plan. And who made the money off of that endeavor?
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney Halliburton. A lot of other defense contractors, while troops are over there without body armor. Based on a lie. You know who sponsored that bill in February of 2014? The then chairman of the Senate VA Committee, Senator Bernie Sanders. Despite the obstructionism from his colleagues, Bernie kept on fighting. Fast forward to April when the VA scandal broke. When the public learned about secret VA waitlists and hundreds of preventable deaths, they were outraged, and rightly so. I was too. I hope all of you were. Finally, Republicans were shamed into passing the bill that they had previously blocked, and thanks to Senator Sanders' continued efforts, the Veterans Choice Act passed through Congress and was signed into law. Enough is enough. Afterwards, Senator John McCain, himself a veteran and former POW, said, quote, Bernie Sanders worked very hard when he was chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee. He does have a record of advocacy for veterans. So case closed, right?
No. No.
Wrong. Because unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished. This is important. After last month's Democratic debate, a couple of bipartisan groups launched attacks against Bernie and called into question his record with veterans. You should know that one group, Concerned Veterans of America, is yet another Koch brothers front group whose goal is to privatize the VA.
Hello.
They falsely claimed that Bernie has shown poor leadership in the Senate, and they accused him of being slow to act after the scandal broke. Such claims, fed to the public by CNN, couldn't be further from the truth. If that were even remotely true, the nation's oldest and largest veterans organizations wouldn't have awarded him their highest honors, but they did. Last August, after the Choice Act was passed into law, the American Legion awarded Bernie their prestigious Patriot Award. The warrant read, quote, Your dedication to those who have borne the battle and their families is unquestionable. When systematic problems plaguing the Veterans Affairs Administration were brought to your attention, you immediately ordered hearings and introduced legislation to improve the lives of those trying to access care. I'll say that again. When systematic problems plaguing the VA were brought to your attention, you immediately ordered hearings and introduced legislation. Sure doesn't sound like he was dragging his feet to me. They continue to say, you are a true champion of the need for a strong VA healthcare system and have been a powerful critic of attempts to privatize the Department of the VA and its essential services. Your commitment to bringing accountability, transparency, and accessibility to the VA is highly commendable. Now you see, Bernie fundamentally opposes privatizing the VA, which is the primary goal of the Koch brothers sham group.
Amen. Shame.
Just to be certain, earlier this year, the VFW also gave Sanders their highest honor. In praising his work and advocacy, the VFW said, after 8 years on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, 2 of them as chairman, it is no understatement to say that Senator Sanders has truly taken care of wounded, ill, and injured veterans and their surviving family members. Veterans everywhere should be proud and comforted to know that this member of Congress has their back. I've said it once and I will say it again. No one has had our backs like Senator Bernie Sanders. It's important to realize that taking care of veterans also means that American troops are only sent to fight in wars that are justified and necessary. On September 11th, 2001, I watched the second Twin Tower fall on TV from my barracks room here in California at the Marine Corps base in 29 Palms. When that happened, no one wanted to hunt down the terrorists who were responsible more than my fellow infantry Marines. And when we were sent to Iraq in 2003, that's what we thought we were doing. We truly thought that Iraq was responsible for 9/11 because that's what Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld told us. They told us that Saddam had rolling WMD labs and that he'd been purchasing yellow cake uranium and aluminum tubes to build a nuclear bomb. Anyone remember this shit? None of it was true. It was all lies. It wasn't a mistake. It was a perpetrated fraud. And yet the media looped the false narrative over and over on TV. Not everyone believed the lies, however. That's right. Bernie Sanders didn't just vote against authorizing the invasion of Iraq. He was one of the few outspoken critics of Bush's plan, or complete lack thereof. If you look back and listen to what he said, Bernie Sanders gave 5 specific reasons why he thought invading Iraq would be a huge disaster. Unfortunately, every single concern that he raised turned out to be true. Thousands of American troops have been killed, young men and women. Hundreds of thousands wounded. Trillions of tax dollars wasted. Terrorism has become a far bigger problem than ever before. Bernie Sanders was right then, and he is right now. The decision to invade Iraq was the biggest foreign policy blunder in decades. And you know what? That kind of foresight matters. That kind of foresight matters when we're talking about a commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. We are still living with the ramifications of the cowboy commander attitude. We need some wisdom in the White House. We need some diplomacy in the White House. That's why this is the most important election of our generation. We can't keep electing establishment candidates and expect to achieve any real change. We just can't do it. If a candidate is taking money from Wall Street, when the laws are written, will the candidate favor us, the American people, or will that candidate favor Wall Street?
Exactly.
And I think one of the most important questions that any candidate can be asked in any debate or any forum, and I think this is the one thing that we should really press home, is what does your donor list say about who you'll represent if elected? Because I'm going to take a look at your donor list, and if I don't see real people, I see legal, fictitious people, multinational corporations, I'm going to question your advocacy on my behalf as an American citizen. If we truly want to restore a government of, by, and for the people, Bernie Sanders will lead us there. In Bernie, we finally have an honest candidate who doesn't take bribes and he isn't corrupt. I know, it's amazing. Amen to Bernie not being corrupt. Absolutely. He spent his entire career rallying against the corrosive influence of money in politics. He stood with the oppressed, the elderly, and the poor. He believes the scientific community and understands the urgent need to act on climate change. When faced with tough decisions like the Iraq vote, he's had the courage to speak out, even when it wasn't popular. And in Congress, he's led the fight to make sure that veterans get the respect and care we deserve when we come home. Bernie Sanders is a man of the people, and without question, he'll make an outstanding president. With that, I'd like to thank you for coming out and saying, enough is enough. How refreshing. And I'll tell you an anecdotal story and then I will leave you be. When the Deepwater Horizon disaster struck our Gulf Coast, I believe I was in college at the time, I was convinced that America would be in the streets letting the government and BP know how they really felt. But to a large degree, that never happened. It was really disappointing. But what I see happening now, I've been to Iowa, I've been to Phoenix, Arizona, I've been to Chicago. I see the genuine excitement that is behind Bernie Sanders' campaign. The people who support Bernie Sanders, and when I say people, I do not mean corporations, is a real slice of Americana. Black, white, Asian, gay, straight, old, young. When I say our generation, I mean all of us coming together, because that's what this generation is going to do. Now get out there and go, let's take back Washington and get Bernie elected. Thank you.
was a truly amazing speech from Tyson Banker. Truly an American hero. All right, so next up, very quickly first, we have a couple of lost items that people found. There's a sweatshirt, not to stop the momentum, but there's a sweatshirt, and more importantly, someone lost a credit card or debit card. It says Stephanie Yanaga. Just so you know, we'll have those over at the booth over there if anyone needs them. And we also have free water over at the booth. All right, so next up we have Faye Hirsty is a heroic activist putting herself out there to stem the tide of climate change before it destroys our planet. Georgia is the co-director of Frailty Myths and the director of GreenPeace's Warehouse program. She will speak about her experience with GreenPeace and the utility of direct action when the electoral process fails.
Recently, I found myself hanging over the side of a bridge 200 feet above the Willamette River. Though it was the middle of the night, the deck of the St. John's Bridge was drenched in streetlights. I stepped over the railing, heart pumping, reset my anchor, and only then looked down. Below me, there was no water, only darkness and stillness. As I expanded my gaze, the darkness was soon broken, and I saw dozens of lanterns floating in the undefined space below. They were kayaktivists. They were there holding vigil, standing guard, ready to yet again stand in the way of unchecked corporate power and influence. It was beautiful. We had arrived not knowing each other would be there, but we were there with the same purpose. News came soon that all 13 climbers were over. I could see the faint headlamps of my comrades across the expanse of the bridge, too far away to touch or speak to, but close enough to feel their power, their bravery, their commitment. In that stretched moment, I was humbled and grateful to feel the strength of the shoulders I was standing on, those who started and have carried on this fight for decades. We were there to stop Shell from drilling in the Arctic, to do whatever was in our power to say enough is enough. We will not stand idly by. The ship Fennica was carrying a mission-critical piece of equipment, without which Shell could not begin drilling in the Arctic. The drilling rig was already in the Arctic waiting, and the Fennica was in Portland. The St. John's Bridge was in between. That was the choke point, the point where we could stand toe-to-toe with those who were more interested in profit than the future. Each climber meticulously set up their camp, sought desperately for warmth, and watched the sun rise behind the forest. There, suspended, 70 feet away from one another, we were enough to form an aerial blockade through which this ship could not pass, and we were ready to stay. The fight, the struggle, however, goes far beyond Shell. What Shell and Arctic drilling represent is a culture and a political climate where the rich and powerful are allowed and often encouraged to move unfettered through our world without respect or accountability to those who feel and will feel in the future the consequences of their actions. A culture of capitalism that teaches us that alone we are not good enough or deserving enough to fight back. A culture that teaches not to value the lives of people of color and to criminalize poverty. A culture that teaches to compete, destroy, and dominate while the basic rights of dignity and survival are stripped and denied at every turn. A culture that tells us we are not responsible or obligated to each other. But these are all lies. So many of our ancestors have taught and shown us that not only is this not the only way, it is the wrong way. That we are, in fact, obligated and responsible for each other, to protect each other and heal each other. We are obligated to engage with our communities and our environments, to recognize and deconstruct institutional and systemic forms of oppression and violence, to bring down white supremacy, racism, and patriarchy, to be good stewards. We are responsible for lifting each other up, being willing to be uncomfortable, and for celebrating love. Democracy and capitalism are not synonyms. Let us reimagine and redefine our democracy in a way that works for everybody. Let us reimagine how we can make it real in each of our lives, heart by heart. We can look to the past, to our ancestors, ancient and recent, to learn the ways of life that our system has tried to force us to forget and to be afraid of. We can also look around us at the amazing grassroots work and powerful direct actions that are happening across the country every day, from Idle No More and the fight against Keystone XL to Black Lives Matter. Movements that are rejecting the principles of a system that tells us to value material and our personal security over building authentic relationships and the well-being of our communities. So many moments and movements are teaching us that we can depend on each other to take care of each other, that we can check each other and have hard conversations with the purpose of healing, growth, and change, rather than competition, ego, and one-upmanship. The long, profound history of nonviolent direct action teaches us so much more than the moment of any action itself. The personal and collective journey that such moments require reach into the deepest parts of our hopes for a better world. It is an incredible thing the first time a person considers taking direct action, to push out of their head all the doubts and the narratives of what society says is wrong, and to replace it with the truth, the full truth of their own empowerment. To come to a place where they are willing and wanting to say, I accept whatever consequence comes from this action. Enough is enough. This beautiful transition is perhaps the most powerful part of any direct action. More than that, it is each time someone who has been taught that they are somehow incapable wields a welding torch, or leaves the ground in a harness, or uses their wheelchair as a blockades device, or stands in front of an armed police officer. Each and every time a person refuses to be silenced, to take back the space that they deserve, and realizes that yes, they can, we get closer to that reimagined world. Each time one of us is able to find our voice and speak truth to power, we get closer. Each time we remember that we are not alone, that our comrades and allies across issues and actions must go through the same process, and then we must learn how to trust each other, to love each other, so that we can walk together into a situation that challenges the powers that be, with no certainty or clarity of what response will be waiting, a response that for many is violent or fatal. Direct action is the willingness to stand up, to say no, to risk everything that capitalism tells us to value and show that we are not afraid. Every action, each moment of bravery verifies what they are most afraid of, that we know, without a doubt, that the weight of their heel is not mighty enough to withstand the power of us all rising together. In our organizing and our activism, we must model the world we are trying to create. In all of our groups and politics, deferring to impacted communities, letting people speak for themselves, understanding the impacts of privilege and heteronormativity, honoring indigenous sovereignty, building just relationships, and embracing real inclusivity are imperative components. Activism is not about going to a march on the weekend to say that you went. It's about investing in and perpetuating a paradigm shift through true self and collective transformation. From my harness, I set my camp about 100 feet below the base of the bridge and 100 feet above the water. Nearly all the sounds I heard came carried on the breeze and were muted by the distance. There was another team of brave people on the bridge where they'd been all night long, protecting our anchors, absorbing both the praise and the anger of any who passed. It gave me such comfort knowing they were there. One by one, each climber let their streamers fly, red, then yellow, then red, then yellow, pointing Shell's vessel away from the Arctic and capturing the imagination of us all. From dawn onwards, the waters below were filled with kayakers, boats, paddleboards, and all other kinds of floating things. The small dock was packed and the park filled with people, there to stand in solidarity and demand climate justice. It should go without saying that the impacts of climate change are vast and deep. The effects can be felt now throughout the world, and the pending consequences are devastating. Fighting against climate change is a fight against environmental racism. It is a fight for justice. Across the world, we see that communities of color are the communities most severely affected by the impact of climate change and environmental degradation. Each day, we are seeing hurricanes and tropical storms become increasingly intense, last longer, blow ever stronger winds, and cause more damage to both ecosystems and communities that are often already suffering. We have seen the double insult to those communities who suffer first because of corporate greed and then are left in the aftermath of a disaster caused by that greed to fend for themselves. Declining crop yields from seemingly endless droughts coupled with high temperatures means hundreds of thousands more people at risk of starvation, disease, and heat-related deaths. Rising sea levels means that those in places like the Pacific Islands, who have the least impact on the cause of climate change, are facing the worst consequences. What are we doing when at the most elemental level we are allowing a system to continue that threatens our very ability to survive? I want to shout out to the Gulf Coast and to the incredible, powerful work that is happening with Gulf Coast Rising and countless other groups. Communities there have suffered both subtle and the most egregious displays of environmental injustice and continue to fight back. The most important lesson I have learned in my personal journey as an activist was 10 years ago in New Orleans in 2005. I was working for a Pacifica radio station, and seeing the rampant racism in the coverage of Hurricane Katrina and hearing Governor Blanco order helicopters not to pick up black men from rooftops, myself and 2 colleagues drove to New Orleans, armed with a microphone and a handheld camera, with the hope that we could get some real stories of people to the airwaves. At 4 days after the storm, no volunteers were yet permitted to enter the city, only journalists, who lined the main street of the French Quarter, which, despite so much of the city still inundated with water, was dry. The lower 9th Ward, of course, which pre-Katrina had one of the highest rates of black home ownership in the country, would have festering floodwaters left there for a month, slowly rotting the structural integrity of the homes, making many impossible to rebuild. While changing a tire just outside the French Quarter, we met the Soul Patrol, a group of locals who were holding it down, refusing to leave, finding resources and distributing them to folks who were still camped out on rooftops in the flooded areas. They told us their story and showed us the truth about what was happening in their community. We walked to the edge of the floodwaters. Leading up to it, I could see the line on the bushes where the water had been, everything dead beneath. We got in a small canoe, and as we waded into other parts of the city, the water continued to get deeper. The city hadn't contracted anyone to remove dead bodies. They were dumping them in the flooded areas. So as the water was allowed to fester, locals did the only thing they could. From their broken canoes, they tied bodies to posts in hopes that, at the very least, those who had lost their lives could be identified and not sink to the depths of a once vibrant neighborhood. In my youth and my privilege, I had never seen anything like that before, or felt the complete disregard and disrespect for human life. The canoe landed on the flooded steps of Mama Dee's house in the 7th Ward. She brought me up, cleaned off the putrid water, and invited me to break bread. In a moment, in her wisdom, she looked into my young, broken heart, put her hand on my shoulder, and said, "As soon as you let their negativity touch you, they win." Then, under the upstairs porch awning, the Soul Patrol ate, persevered, and loved. Those words have deeply influenced my understanding of how to move through this world since the moment she uttered them. I am grateful for having had the privilege to have passed so much time with a powerful leader. During the following months, she showed me that for every moment of struggle, there must also be equal moments of love. As Hurricane Katrina and so many other instances make blatantly clear, there is no separation. We cannot talk about climate change without talking about racism and exploitation. We cannot talk about water conservation without talking about who are the ones that are dying of thirst and disease. And we cannot talk about stopping Shell from drilling in the Arctic without talking about a system of corporate power that allows the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer. We had been hanging under the bridge well past the 24-hour mark as the sun came up on the 2nd day. People were still in the water and on the docks. While unknown to me at the time, amazing art and direct actions were happening simultaneously. Murals and paintings were being created, other bridges were being shut down. People were taking action in a myriad of ways. The inspiration and the strength in the air was palpable. In the afternoon, the energy changed. Rumors traveled on the wind that the ship was coming. We lowered ourselves out of our camps and further down the line so that we would be blocking its path. Many of us were asked if we were scared. My answer to this had to be yes. I fully trusted my climbing system, my purpose, my teammates. I trusted the rightness of my action and the rightness to stand between Shell and the Arctic. What I was scared of What I didn't trust was Shell and all it represents, because their actions and the systems they condone put no value on the lives of those who suffer because of them or try to stand in their way. The global plutocracy under which they function exploits and destroys to meet whatever ends they aim for. The ship passed under the drawbridge, steaming towards us. With bated breath, the climbers, the anchor support, the others in the park and in the water below, and all those watching from a distance, waited. I hailed the Fennica on the radio and told them that their current course was putting lives at risk, that we had no intention of moving, and to stop. Nothing. I repeated the message. Then a voice came over the radio, terse but clear. Activists, this is the Fennica. We have stopped. For what seemed like eternity, the ship sat there, facing us but no longer moving forward. And then it slowly turned around and steamed away. For an instance, for a rare and beautiful moment, everyone there, everyone watching, felt the immensity of people power, of what is possible, of a world where Shell and their like bow to the will of the people. Eventually, at the 40th hour of the blockade, after 3 climbers had been removed to make just enough space, the ship returned. Our blockade broken and unable to reconnect, we waited. But another blockade formed, as countless kayakers lined up under the bridge, facing directly at the ship, ready to get in its way however possible. For the next hour, it was chaos. The police boats would remove one kayak only for another to slip through. People were throwing themselves in the water, refusing to be corralled, and demanding their right to occupy the space, saying enough is enough. It was incredible. So many different groups of people from different backgrounds and ethnicities, from different campaigns and narratives, carrying on a battle that has been being fought for decades by Native folks in Alaska and embodying the full scope of what climate justice is about. When the ship finally suffered its way under the bridge and passed so close to me I felt like I could touch it, a large part of me felt like we'd failed. It was silent as we watched it leave the last kayaks behind and head toward Alaska. But then an uproar of voices filled the space. The waters were again filled with boats and people cheering out of anger, out of excitement, out of inspiration, and out of love. We hadn't failed. We'd stopped Shell for 40 hours and more. Every person there, every moment of resistance, great or small, direct or indirect, had grown our strength, empowered our movement, and connected us just a little more. Last month, Shell withdrew from the Arctic. It is a victory for everyone. To the environmental movement, we cannot claim to care about the environment or climate change and not also fight to end the war on Black people, stop mass incarceration, demand people are paid a living wage and treated with respect, honor Native sovereignty, demand equal rights and representation for women and LGBTQ folks, fight for immigrant rights, and work to end corporate dominance and military aggression. These fights and others are inherently connected in a fight for a just world. In a system that succeeds by dividing and conquering, we must come together to fight back, holistically. As is demonstrated today and all over, the grassroots movement is mighty and growing. It is the most powerful thing we have if we utilize it. I encourage everyone to find a group, to get involved, participate, and engage within your communities, but also reach out to other communities so that we can be each other's allies. And of course, however you understand it, take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgia, for your inspiring story. Also, I just want to say, we've almost reached our fundraising goal, but we still have a little ways to go. So if anybody could donate even a small amount as low as $1, we have a physical place to donate over there or on our website. It's on the banner there behind me. enoughisenough.site/give. Anyhow, moving right along, we're almost done here. The question remains, will we act upon the inspiration given to us today? Our final speaker today will share with us nearby opportunities to act upon the knowledge Georgia has just shared with us. He's a tireless activist that won't submit to the culture of corporate greed and confronting capitalism. Here he is, Steve Ongerth.
Well, I have to say, those are all tough acts to follow. I promise I'll be brief so we can all get out there and keep on doing the work. Well, greetings, brothers and sisters, fellow workers, all my relations. My name is Steve Ongerth. I am a member of System Change, Not Climate Change, the co-founder of the IWW Environmental Unionism Caucus, and part of a coalition called No Coal in Oakland. I am a union transport worker of almost 20 years. I am also a climate justice activist. That is not a contradiction, but the powers that be want you to think it is. For far too long, the 1% have enslaved us to a climate-destroying, cancer-causing, fossil fuel and radioactive nuclear-powered energy system. For over half a century, the 1% have pitted workers against those who pitted workers in those industries who justifiably deserve to live with dignity against environmentalists who rightfully point out that these industries that employ them are unsustainable. For far too long, both sides have talked past each other and failed to see the real adversary, an economic system based on the theft of the workers' labor and the Earth's precious life force that sustains us all. An economic system that privatizes the wealth created by the labor from those resources and socializes the cost to the 99.99999, etc. %. That's the workers, the people, and all other living things. That economic system is capitalism. It's destroying the climate and the viability of life on Earth itself. But now, workers and environmentalists are coming together to say enough is enough. This year, when union refinery workers went on strike, environmentalists marched on their picket line because the environmentalists recognized that though those refinery workers are employed by an industry the environmentalists know cannot be sustained, they recognize the workers aren't their real enemy. Over the course of the year, railroad workers and environmentalist activists have held summits in which they discuss common issues of railroad workers' safety and the dangers accrued by rail bomb trains and found that they have common ground. This week, over 150 union members gathered in Oakland at the California Nurses Association Hall to watch Naomi Klein's film, This Changes Everything. And at the end of the film, the room was filled with applause. Everywhere, workers are seeing that their enemy isn't the environmentalist, and that there are no jobs on a dead planet. Environmentalists are recognizing that the workers must be part of the discussion. We must demand a just transition to a sustainable, democratic, clean, energy-based economy. This is a huge awakening. Because of this awakening yesterday, due to 7 years of organizing by indigenous peoples, landowners, farmers, workers, environmentalists, and communities, President Obama killed the northern leg of the Keystone XL pipeline. This is a huge victory. But we have much more work to do. And I'm here to ask all of you to join in that cause. So on November 21st in Oakland at 10 a.m. at Lake Merritt Amphitheater, we need all of you to join the Northern California Climate Mobilization and tell the delegates at the climate change meeting in Paris that enough is enough. Enough is enough! No more giveaways, no more fake deals, no more sham treaties. We must put an end to this system. And on December 8th, we need all of you to stand with the community of Oakland, including residents, local businesses, and the faith community, and at least 17 different unions that are saying no to coal exports, fighting a Keystone XL pipeline of sorts, a plan to transport coal by rail by a greedy developer, Phil Tagami, through the port of Oakland, endangering the health of the residents there and shipping it overseas, where it would enable the further destruction of the climate. This is a very important struggle, one that has brought union workers and environmentalists together. Be at the Oakland City Council Hall on 5 p.m. on December 8th in Oakland, and together we'll say enough is enough. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone who came out today. If anybody wants to stick around and help us pack up, we could use some help with that if you want to donate your time instead of your money. Many thanks to Denny Leonard and all the amazing folks who volunteered countless hours to make this rally a success. A special shout out goes to the Veterans for Bernie and the National Nurses United. Without your support, we could not have pulled this off. Again, please consider we are building a movement and continue doing good work. More events, more rallies, more action, more revolution. Form organization, make a difference. They have the money, but we have the people. Pick up the phone and call your representatives. Now, I know there's not too many people here left, but can I get a feel the burn? Feel the burn! Feel the burn! Feel the burn! Feel the burn! Thank you!
Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Yell and scream and get loud! Enough is enough!